Hey, Andrew, welcome to the Elevated Life podcast. We are so excited to dive into your wisdom today and showcase how freaking magical and inspirational you are.
Thank you both for having me. I'm excited for jumping into conversation with you both.
Yes, it's so exciting. So, Andrew, I came across you many years ago when I was, just Googling and goggling over Sam Villa and how amazing his work is. And like, oh my God, he's like the hair god, right? So I came across you through his work and your education, and you've always stood out to me. There's always like that soul auric connection where I'm like, this guy is dope. Like, I love this guy. I love the way he teaches. I love his voice. I just love everything about him. And what I didn't know is that beyond just teaching hair, you teach things in the mindset realm, breath work, how to project our voice and how to be authentic through that. Just so many different things in maybe the woo-woo mindset personal growth world that I love, and that is right in alignment with me as a hairdresser kind of coming out of the spiritual closet. So to have you on our podcast today is such an honor and like many years full circle moment.
I love that. Yeah, it's really cool that like Sam Villa was such an awesome experience because I feel like it connected me with so many people that I never would have connected with. Because I'll be honest, like especially leading up to this year, I've been total shit with like social media and that kind of stuff. But being on Sam's channel, that connected me to like millions of hairdressers, honestly. And it's been so cool that so many people that my first connection, like with you, was through hairdressing. But then it's like, oh, okay, like there's some commonalities too beyond just hairdressing. Oh, you're into spirituality? I'm into spirituality. Oh, you're into breathwork stuff? Oh, I'm into breathwork stuff. Oh, you're a coach too? Oh, neat. It's like I've had so many of those experiences, and it's been really cool too to just see that so many of the connections that I did make that were pretty strictly about hair education. Now that I'm not really teaching hair anymore, have continued and actually gotten even deeper.
Man, it's amazing to see that a lot of us are now finding ourselves on similar paths. Just like you said, the more I talk to people, and it doesn't matter where I talk to them from. It can be at an NBA game. It can literally be in the grocery store. And you start talking to people, and eventually they come up with those questions of like, do you meditate? Do you have a meditation championship shirt that I wear randomly? And I will tell you the amount of people that have stopped me to ask me about meditation, or I love the older guys that are doing it now. Like I see the guys 65 and 70, like, oh my gosh, I was in the war and I just started meditating. And oh, I love that you're like, promoting that or talking about it. I'm like, man, this is a conversation I never would have thought that I would have with people. What do you think as people, since hairdressers are such service-based business, and I think more than anyone, what's really happening to people because they admit things to you guys that they don't talk to their spouses about, they don't talk to their mom about. What do you think that impact of being able to listen and hear people?
That's why we've all quit. No, I'm just kidding.
It's true though. Y'all just understand people from a different point of view than I think most of the world gets. And I would not have known that had I not spent so much time with Britt in the salon. Do you think that any of that played a part in maybe discovering things that were maybe blinders in your own life or problems that you may have had, or that would have opened you up more to like, oh, I'm really empathizing with these people. Maybe if I find more modalities that can help them, maybe I can be a part in the facilitation of their transformation.
Yeah, totally. Because you're so right. I think we have a really special bond with people because we're close. We're so close with them. We're one of the few people that actually touches them that's not in their family. And so we have this really close connection with our guests in the chair, yet we're also kind of safer than even their friends, because we might do some of their friends' hair, but I feel like there's a bit of like unspoken trust that we're not going to talk about what we just talked about with them. We're not going to be like, oh, well, so-and-so said this. Well, I mean, yes, there's people out there that do that. But, for most of us, I feel like there's a trust that we build. And I had a client that I was one of the first people she talked to about her husband's suicide because, she felt like she couldn't open up to other people because she was too close. It was too close. And I was the person that she felt safe with at that point to have that conversation with. So absolutely, I think that part of why I'm a good coach is because of all that time at the chair, listening and empathizing and being present with people. And kind of like more specifically to your question, it definitely shined so much light on my own experiences and things that I knew that I had to do work for myself, because I definitely I felt a responsibility to those people that were opening up to me like that, to, I guess, in a way, kind of have my shit together a bit so that I could be there for them, so that I could support them. So yeah, absolutely. Those stories and those experiences that we have with our guests. I know for me personally, it definitely shined a lot of light on my own life and my own experiences. And I don't know that I'd be a life coach. Well, I don't necessarily call myself a life coach, but that's kind of the broad spectrum term, I guess. But I don't necessarily know that I'd be a coach without hairdressing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I always say I spent decades listening to women, how they think and feel about themselves, and it's brutal. It's like not pretty in the hair salon. So I had to come up with a way to empower them from the inside by choice, not by their hair color or their hairstyle. So I'm 100% with you. I'm curious, how did you get into hair? Like how, tell us the story. I need to know.
Oh my gosh. So it's actually kind of a funny story. I'll try and keep it brief because it's actually, it could turn into many layers of story, and I love to tell stories. But I had moved to Salt Lake City with the intention to work in the music industry, because the University of Utah had a recording engineering program. I was a bass player. You can see in my background, I've got my instruments hanging up, but I was a bass player. So I wanted to work in a recording studio, and I was thinking I wanted to be a studio bass player. Luckily, I got the opportunity to work in a recording studio. I was doing sound for clubs at night. I was working at Musicians Front. I was playing in a band. So my life very much revolved around music, and I was having those opportunities. Pretty quickly, I realized that taking music from something that I was super passionate about and making it my resource of income and like my career was slowly killing music for me, because the music industry is brutal. It is terrible. So I did that for about a year, and I finally figured out that I was like, okay, music has to stay my passion. So I need to figure out what I'm going to do for a career. And my sister was a hairdresser, and I would, spend time with her at our salon, and I would see her doing something beautiful and creative, having a great time with these people, and they were handing her money. And that, she was a booth renter, so she had total freedom. She was, oh yeah, I'm going to close my books for 2 weeks, and I'm going to go on vacation, or I'm going to do this. And it was just like, wow, this is a pretty cool business. I will be fully transparent in the fact that I had no interest in like the art of hair before that, though. Like, it wasn't like I grew up going, oh, I think hair is so cool or anything like that. I just thought it was like, oh, this could be a cool job. Luckily, in Salt Lake City, you could still apprentice to get your hair license. You didn't have to go to hair school, because my sister went to hair school, and she was like, don't go to hair school if you don't have to. Her relationship with hair schools was terrible. So I found this young guy named Tyson who had just opened a salon. It was like him and this other guy, David, and they were these like the two hot, cool, fancy hairdressers in town, just opened this new salon, did all the models' hair, like all that kind of stuff. And I walked into a salon and I was like, hey, I'm looking for an apprenticeship. It's like, well, that's good timing, because I'm looking for an apprentice right now. Like, it was just perfect timing. So we sat down, had a conversation, and within a few weeks, I was in the salon starting to learn how to shampoo hair. And after the first few days of shampooing beautiful people's hair and having them hand me tips, because I'd given them this great shampoo and head massage, I was like, yeah, I think this is a cool industry. So that was how I became a hairdresser. And I was hooked fast, because Tyson was the regional education director for TG. And so within a few months of me starting with him, we went to TG World Release, which is like a 3-day rock concert for hairdressers, basically in Dallas, Texas. And so I got to see that there was this like total rock star level of existence within the hair industry. So yeah, I was like, okay, done, sold.
Sold.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons here. Even going back to where number one, if since everyone has a hairstylist, tip your hairstylist more. They take on more energy and more people's problems and have to deal with stuff outside. They have to learn self-care. Because I'll tell you that the hairstylists who don't learn self-care fall. They fall hard, and when it actually hits them, it impacts everything. It impacts how they eat, whether they're doing exercise or not, everything. I mean, it literally goes through, and they hold on to so many of those issues. So many hairstylists that I've ever met are empaths, and they will just literally, you come in there and they're not just doing your hair, they will literally take on all of your problems and they will live them in their body and deal with those kind of emotions. So tip your hairstylist. The second thing is that if you're in a position where you touch somebody, just know how powerful touch is. So even when you're with your partner or when you're with your kid and you give them a hug, the amount of energy that gets telegraphed and moved to the other person from that touch is something that you cannot even put or explain into words. The other thing I want to touch on quickly is that a lot of times the great prospects in life aren't things that you're necessarily thinking about. They're things that just show up in your awareness, because a lot of people are so hell-bent on, well, what's my purpose in life? And I don't know what my thing is. And maybe if I just keep doing this, and maybe like, look, just relax a little bit. Sometimes it's just literally right there. You just have to walk around and go talk to people, like, and just make something happen and just try stuff out. Like, a lot of people are so afraid to do that, but that's really where all the magic even happens. I mean, that's the way life is. So I have a question for you. So we found out how you got into hair, but why breath work? Why, what were you going through, or what is, I mean, we don't find these modalities because they're fun. I mean,
we're happy and healthy.
I've never found out a modality because, you know, I was just like, well, this just sounds exciting. Normally it's because like, shit, I need that, or one of my clients needs that, or I have to find something because what I've been doing has not been working. So how did you get into, how'd you get into whole mastering the breath?
It started with this coaching modality and that I began studying called multiple brain integration techniques. So it's based on the principle that we actually have intelligence in the heart, we have intelligence in the gut, of course we have intelligence in the mind, we have intelligence throughout our nervous system, like the whole body has intelligence, let's just say that. A big part of that coaching modality is getting people into a state of coherence. Because if the nervous system's way up in fight or flight, sympathetic tone, or if it's like way down in like the deep doldrums of parasympathetic, of course, people aren't going to be able to access intelligence within themselves. So we specifically use coherent breathing within that practice to help people get the nervous system into a better place, into a more balanced state, so that we can do coaching. So that was my first introduction into anything about breath, especially the fact that I had heard about like breath work, but I had kind of heard of it from like the Wim Hof, like the Tumo style breathing, that almost like a, you know, these kind of complicated or like pretty lofty techniques. I didn't realize that we could just simply affect the nervous system just by making our breath an even pace in and an even pace out. That was like total mind blowing to me. So it was that coaching program that started me in getting interested in breath work. And ever since then, I've kind of dabbled in it. When I started to have the issues with my voice, with my, just with my voice, my good friend Sean Float, who has been an incredible physical therapist isn't even a good word for him, because he's a body healer. He's incredible. And he's also a yoga teacher in traditional hatha yoga. When we started to look at what was happening with my voice, it was very apparent there was a breath aspect of it, because you'll hear it once in a while. There'll be almost this like interruption of my voice, and it's almost like the breath stops for a second, like it hits a wall, and then it kind of comes through. So we decided, he had heard about Oxygen Advantage, it's very much focused on functional daily breathing. It's about teaching people how to return to their natural and supportive and healthy breath. So he started his oxygen advantage training, and I was one of his test subjects. And like the effects were immediate. I mean, within the first few practices, it was like, holy shit, this is helping so much. So because I had such a good experience with it, I went through and I got my certification through that company too, so that I could train other people on oxygen advantage. So that, to your point, yeah, absolutely. A lot of times it's these things we're experiencing in their lives, and very rarely is it something where it's like fun and happy and that we're like, oh yeah, I'm really enjoying life, I think I'll choose breath work. It's usually like, oh my gosh, like something's happening and I'm in pain or something's failing. That leads us to that place that it's like, okay, I've got to look for something that's going to be a resource for this. But I have to say now, it's like, it is a central piece. I don't do a lot. I have done a few just breathwork trainings for different places, but it's integrated in everything I do.
I think that's so fascinating. You know, when you think about the chakras and the energy that each thing is connected to, our throat chakra is our creative expression, our ability to speak our truth and share our authentic self with the world. So the work that you're doing now is so beautifully tied to, you know, when there's a dis-ease in the body, when something's not flowing harmoniously, we've got to, that's our body signal of saying, hey, pay attention. When I was born, I actually came out with my umbilical cord wrapped around my throat. And, you know, I literally was lucky to be alive. And through hypnosis work and past life regression, I realized that a lot of that stems from me not being able to express my truth, not being able to speak up, or if I do, maybe in a past life, I was hung for that. So interesting enough, when I learned about automatic writing, where you could just like go into trance, relax, and have your spirit guides write through you, I don't play around when I ask these like spiritual tools the questions, you know, I was like, what am I here to do? And I wrote 2 words in the worst handwriting. So I know I didn't write it because I'm like a stickler for that. 2 words. One was sing, and the second was teach. And my whole life, well, one, my dad's a musician, and he was quite a famous musician in the 70s. So it's interesting that I grew up in a household with music constantly playing. And at the time I was like, sing, what does that mean? I'm not going to be like a singer of a band. Like, I don't, that what? Of course, we resist the things we need the most. I'm waiting for that band to appear. But I now realize that our voice and the tone and the harmony and everything that we express through our throat is like our music to the world. What in the world?
What was that?
We have a hairless cat and he almost never talks, and he's just like yelling right now as you're talking about the voice. I tell you, he's gotten to where if we will play the singing bowls, or if Britt will play with like her like decks of cards and stuff like that, he will come out. Or if we're in Shavasana, he will come lay on us during yoga, and any other time he does not do anything. I mean, he just is just a hand.
Oh my goodness.
They're so intuitive. It's ridiculous.
They know. So, okay, express yourself, sing out loud. Like your voice is a reflection of your energy, your attitude, the love, the compassion, like the tone, just, let's talk about that. So tell us a little bit more. When I'm listening to you talk, it's almost as if I'm listening to like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and how he has that throat condition. Is that have you found an issue? Like, have we given it a name? Do we understand where this comes from?
So my particular issue does not. It basically has there's no medical aspect to it. I've had ear, nose, and throat doctors scope my throat, all kinds of stuff. So there's medical aspects, of course, because there is a physical challenge to it. A lot of it is the stress that I put on it. And that's one of the things is I was never taught how to actually speak properly. And I've been teaching for 20 years. Like I went through lots of classes about like how to create a lesson plan structure, how to, use good inflection and tone and pace and all of these different things. So all those technical aspects of teaching were taught, but no one ever taught me about good voice care or how to actually regulate your breath and the tension in the throat so that you don't destroy your vocal cords. So I think from pretty early, there was kind of a weak spot, which was the voice. A couple of years ago, I took a position within Samvia that was kind of like a corporate position, and it wasn't the right position. The guy that was he was kind of my direct report. He had resigned from the company, and I was like, well, I kind of already do a lot of the stuff that he did, so why don't I just take that position? And at first I was super excited to do it. I mean, I was excited about the opportunity, but a few months into it, I just was like, I was not happy. And I'm sitting through these very long business focused meetings about systems and processes and things like that, which are totally necessary and important within a business. But I wasn't supposed to be sitting in that room having that conversation. And I'm also the kind of person that if I'm in a group, I'm listening, kind of picking up on things, and then I'll wait for my turn to speak. And, you know, a lot of the leadership were like pretty powerful people. So they're like quick and very, you know, responsive, very fast to talk. And so I started to get this feeling like, well, I'm not being heard. I'm not, you know, being seen within this group, and kind of creating all these stories. And so what comes next, like the ego is like, oh, well, you got to speak up, like you got to speak your voice. And so instead of just speaking from the place that I'm happy to, which is like peaceful, I started to feel like I had to like command my place within the conversation. And so I really started to push my voice hard. And there were times I'd be about to speak, my larynx would just lock. Like the vocal folds would just not move. And so what did I do? I pushed harder. And so I just fucking shredded my larynx. It was just terrible. Like I was having to a point that people were making comments on Samvia videos like, is Andrew okay? He sounds really sick. Because even in my hair videos, it was like I was struggling just to get through them. So my condition that I've been working with for the last couple of years had really everything to do with a sense of not feeling heard, not feeling understood. But I think more so, it was my body telling me, this isn't your place to speak. Like you don't have a voice here. You don't need to have a voice here because it's not your place. And then the good thing is everyone at Samvia company is awesome. And so once I discovered that this was part of the issue, and I was really open with them, I'm like, my health is actually declining because I'm so unhappy in this position. So they let me step back to just being education director again, which was back to what I did care about, which is teaching and facilitating. And things started to get a little bit better, but it was still every time I was talking about hair, throat closed up. And I had known for a while that my interest and my passion in hair was dwindling. And it was hard because we have such an identity around it, right, Britt? Like we create such an identity that, well, I'm a hairdresser. I teach haircutting. And so it was like, I was terrified to speak up that I kind of don't give a shit about hair anymore. Like that was really hard to come to, but my body kind of forced me into it. It was like, look, we're not going to take this anymore. You have something much more important out there for you to talk about. So let's stop talking about hair. Let's focus on your coaching company. Let's start heading that direction. I mean, honestly, end of 2020, that was when I told Sam I was resigning from education director. I wasn't going to teach hair anymore and focus on my coaching company. They were super supportive. And coming into 2021, this started to get better almost immediately. It was so awesome. Through having conversations with people now that are experiencing really similar things to me, which is basically a choking off kind of sensation, they're having the same experience. they've been to ear, nose, and throat doctors. They've like had the medical diagnoses, and that's not what's helping. But as soon as I talk to them about their relationship with their voice and being heard and being seen, being understood, using their voice in a way that feels like it has purpose to them from deep inside, I really think that that's probably the foundation of most voice issues at this point, is one of those aspects.
I totally agree with you on that. Just being energetically off when you're not speaking your truth, when you're not expressing your authentic creativity. For me, it created tonsillitis my entire life. I was also abused in my throat as a child. So there was and I didn't speak up about it. And so there was so much medical issues that stem from an emotional trauma that I experienced from a young age. And I'll never forget, I was going to a holistic dentist. And we even got to the point where we were scanning every tooth with like this fancy, I don't even know what machine, but some frequencies. And when she got to the tooth that I keep saying, there's a problem here, like there's something going on in my tooth, every dentist, no, I'm looking at the scans, there's nothing wrong. I'm like, I know my body, there's a fucking problem. Like, what's the deal? Yeah. She's scanning all my teeth. She's scanning everything. She's like, I just don't get it. And when she got to that tooth and scanned it and that frequency hit it, I started crying and I said, I don't feel like I'm being heard. No one's fucking listening to me. And that was just like this, like a light bulb about not just in the tooth aspect, but just in everything, like just expressing my love in the way that I know how. Like I want people to be able to accept me in my form. And yeah, that was a huge awakening moment for me, just not realizing I don't feel heard and recognizing maybe I'm speaking to the wrong crowd, just like you.
Yeah. And I know for sure people that are listening right now are probably like bobbing their head because this is something that I think is really prolific. Like this, and so I did a post about this just maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it was the first time I talked a lot about what has happened with my own voice. Here's why I know this is so prolific. That specific post was 16,000 views more than any other post I've ever done in my entire life. And I'm not like a big influencer, like I don't have a huge following, but that post got like 26,000 views. And you know, I'm stoked if like a post gets a couple thousand. So I was like, oh, okay. This is important. This is really important. And people started reaching out that I didn't even know, just like strangers sending me direct messages like, oh my gosh, like there was this one gentleman. He's like, I can't speak louder than a whisper. None of my doctors can figure out what's happening. And I just simply asked, I was like, can I just ask you a hard question? And he's like, yeah, of course. And I was like, do you feel like you're heard by the people that are around you? He's like, no. I was like, have you ever been told you were too loud when you were a kid? He's like, oh, well, yeah, when I was a kid, I was like really outgoing. He's like, that's why this is so frustrating. As a kid, I was super outgoing. I was super loud. And so I always was being told to quiet down, quiet down. And something hit me so hard. I'm reading this book about the voice. The first way that we express ourselves as a baby is through our cry. Like our crying is the mechanism of communication that we use to get what we want and what we need. When she set that out, I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. But the next sentence in the book was what just like, she's like, and what do we do to a baby that's crying? Shh. We try to quiet them. This baby is trying to tell us, they're trying to express themselves to the world. And the first thing we do is, shh, you're too loud. Shh, you're too loud. I mean, think about that. This is something from the time that we come out of the womb, we are being told to quiet ourselves. Like, it's just.
This reminds me, I'm sorry. This reminds me so much of one of my best friends has a 6-year-old who is mute and autistic. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I've received messages from all beings of all sort. And one morning I received a message from her son, and I was very just crying when I woke up, and I called her and I said, I received a message from Isaac. I know this sounds weird, but I have to share it with you. And I told her that there was a moment while he was in the womb where he felt very scared and very afraid. And that was he made a choice in that moment that he would never speak because he was afraid of what would happen. And she just started crying. And she said, I know exactly when that was. I was locked in the bathroom, huddled in the corner, crying with my partner, screaming all these horrible things to me through the door, beating on the door. And I thought to myself, why would I have a child with this person? Why would I bring a child into the world with this person? And that was the moment the child made that decision to not speak. And today, now that she's divorced him, they've done the healing modalities, giving him tools to like relearn and just feel safe again is really what it was. He finally feels safe enough and he's speaking, like not full sentences, but words are coming out. He's articulating things that weren't happening before. I've always known he would speak. And that moment just was feeling safe to speak up, feeling safe to be seen. It starts in womb. It probably starts in past life. That's why I came out with my umbilical cord around my throat. It's so beautiful that you're sharing this. It's like the things that we go through, our traumas led us to the healing modalities that have worked for us, which is now why we want to teach and empower others to access their own power and their own healing. And it's so beautiful to see people like you using that struggle as a sense of strength for a foundation of creating change and giving people tools to heal, because that's ultimately, I feel like what we're like, the people that chose to be on this planet at this time are light working people here to bring more love and more peace back into the world. Like you talked about, when you were communicating from your ego, it created literal dis-ease in the body. It created physical manifestations of problems. And when you started operating from a place of harmony and love and coming from that, like a more soulful place, like things started to instantly change and heal for you. So I think that's so profound. Like when we're operating out of ego, out of like, will people accept me, trying to seek validation. When we're coming from those places, we're never going to hit that level of fulfillment. So I think it's beautiful to work through those pains and share with people like you did. I think the reason why it went so viral is because you were so vulnerable. People identify with people who are struggling and that have moved through that because it gives them hope. And that's what you're a hope dealer, my friend.
I love that.
Yeah, the other thing that's really fascinating is that I noticed that when Britt would get upset, which doesn't happen very often, but when she does, it's a fire. And she wouldn't be able to express herself. And so what I learned to do was, we got to get out in the woods and let her yell. Like we got to let her just, be a wild banshee for a while until she kind of burns all that out. And what I learned doing that is that, so there are a lot of people that struggle with meditation. It's like for some people, it's like the most difficult thing you can ask them to do is just sit down for a few minutes. Like that's going to be like, they'd scale a building, they'd hold spiders and snakes, all that. They can overcome those battles, but to just get into sit and do nothing, it's nearly impossible. And so what I learned to be able to do was, for those kind of people, what really worked was movement. So when you do like active meditations. And so watching Britt yell like that, I started implementing yelling as part of a meditation, as part of a longer form meditation. And what's really interesting about it, talking about breath work and the altered states that you can get, like you're saying, when you're in this fight or flight, not much change can happen. When you kind of relax a little bit, get your body kind of this even keel, suddenly that change is possible now. You can actually see what's going on underneath the hood. And so what I've noticed is that when you take people out and you get them to move, maybe it's dancing first, just so they can sort of get into it, maybe 10, 15 minutes dancing, just really get them moving. And then once they've done that, now that their bodies become receptive, you can get them yelling. And so if you can get a person to yell or beat something or hit a pillow or tennis racket or whatever the thing is for another good 10, 15 minutes, after that moment, they can finally meditate. The brain's calm. And so what I've learned is that being able to use movement, being able to use the voice, you can access states that you normally can't, because our mind is so resistant to giving up that control that it so desperately needs to allow the ego to work. And so I'm amazed, because like I haven't ever had any voice problems, but doing hypnosis with clients and working with Britt and things like that, like a lot of people do. It is much more common than I would have ever dreamt of. And the power that you have as you speak is so amazing. Did you find that as you came to terms with what was happening physically, that it altered like the way that you have to think and use words?
Yes, because it has to be more intentional. Like I can't just sit here and rattle off, because I like to. I love to just talk and like, have these, lengthy conversations, but my voice can't handle that. And I use my voice every single day as the tool for my work. As a coach, I have to be able to ask my coaching clients questions. I have to be able to share certain tools with them. So I have to have my voice. And I'm a teacher, that's like at my heart and soul, I'm a teacher. And so I have to be able to use my voice. But what it's also done is, so it's made me more intentional with how I speak, what I say, what I lend my voice to. But it's also reminded me, like I've always been a believer within kind of the education realm, especially, that the more that I let them do the work for themselves, the better their experience is going to be and the more learning they're actually going to have. Because I'm a really intelligent person. Like I say that without like, fluffing my own feathers. But why I say that is I can figure shit out. So I can take the puzzle and I will figure it out. And I'm really good at that and taking that whole puzzle and breaking it down in a way so that it's really easy to understand. So as a teacher, I got really good at explaining everything, which people liked because I took a lot of the mystery out of things. I made things really easy for people to understand. But what I recognized is that at the end, they may understand it, but they don't own it because they didn't have to put much into it. Like I kind of took all the work out of it for them. Like I was able to explain exactly why you would hold your hands like this and take this section and elevate the hair here and cut this way. I could just basically explain it to them and they'd go, oh shit, okay, I get it. I don't even need to work on the haircut. I get it. But I had taken the experience away. Like I said, they cerebrally could understand it, but they hadn't actually learned it. And so there was that aspect that I learned that I could kind of explain things and explain things and explain things, but it wasn't necessarily as helpful as if I just kind of dropped something in their lap and then said, go play with this for a minute. Cool. Okay, you played with that for a minute. Come back. Let's find out. What did you discover? What else could happen? Okay, let's go play with it again. So I started to take a much more coach style approach to my education processes. And this has reminded me of that. If I get a little too wordy, my voice starts to get tight and it starts to get hard. And so I'm like, oh, okay, good reminder. It's time to shut up, Andrew. Let them do some work for themselves here.
Oh, it's so true. It's like the same is true with teaching enlightenment. We can all tell you the answer right here, total saturation and love, and we all know love is the answer, but are we doing it? Are we practicing it every day? Are we like living and embodying that? Like that's a different question. So I think you're right. We can give the answer, we can give the key, but if you don't learn it for yourself, like, hey, don't touch that hot stove till you touch that stove, you're not going to know for yourself and it's not your truth. So I think that's beautiful.
It's interesting in coaching because you have to inspire them while allowing them to suffer at the same time. You got to let them kind of be like, well, that sucked. Yeah. All right. Well, let's try some new approaches. What would be a new approach for you? And it's amazing though, what happens because suffering's not that much fun. And so when you want to teach people something, like the easiest way to get their feet in the fire a little bit and be like, yeah, no, let's not go down that route. We'll be a better route. And so it's incredible what you can do if you don't always give 100%. I find so many people try and give 100%, 110%. And a lot of times when you give so much, it builds up the expectation. So like whatever you've given, you have that exact amount of expectation back. So if you're one of those person just gives all of your friends presents for all of their birthday, but they forget to call you on your birthday, or they, you know, all those kind of things, like there's an expectation that happened because you gave so much to that. And what I found for me is that the less that I give people, now not zero, I don't ignore people, that's not what I mean. But I just mean like if I give them some and let them run with some, what they discover is typically better than what I would have given them in the beginning anyways, because they seem to add their own personality mix that I can't do. Like I can only add, you know, what I've done so far in my experiences. And sometimes if you'll give them just a nugget, they'll be able to take their experiences and run with that and be like, hey, look what I found out, and surprise both of you. That's why I feel like I can learn from people so much better that way too. It becomes a learning process between the both of us. And now it's, you know, we're kind of coaching each other, but it's through like this really beautiful experience that we've shared.
Mm-hmm.
So many years ago, we went to the Brendan Burchard conference, and he was telling us his techniques that he learned through Roger Love on healing his voice after he does a multi-day seminar. And when you started posting about your voice and Roger Love, I was like, okay, this guy is dope. He knows what he's talking about. Like that was that moment for me. So I want to know, what are some of the tools that you use to heal your voice after teaching or after being too wordy? Or what are some of those tools that you use that people who are struggling with that, one, speaking your truth, like let's start there, but two, what are some of the things that you do? I see you're also drinking hot tea. That's a must for us when anytime we're doing podcast or talking for a long period of time. So what are some other tools that you use?
Voice warm-ups. Like before we jumped on this, I was doing vocal warm-ups, which is multiple steps. I love that you brought up movement, because I move my body first and I do breath work first. Specifically breath work that helps to bring up the carbon dioxide levels within the body, because higher carbon dioxide levels helps us to stay in the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. Talking pretty much is hyperventilation. We expel 10 times more air. That I'm making that figure up, by the way, but I know that we expel a hell of a lot more air through talking than we do through sitting and calmly nasal breathing, which is what we should be doing most of the time. So talking is hyperventilation. So before I go in to a conversation like this, where I know I'm going to have to talk quite a bit, working to make sure that my nervous system is as regulated as I possibly can get it to be, because nerves come up, of course, but also making sure that I have kind of those balances within my body, more towards the CO2 side, the hypercapnic. Hypercapnic? Yes, I think hypercapnic. But anyway, so movement, breath work, then actual voice sounds that work with the face. So lip trills. It's fun and it makes you kind of smile, and it moves the lips. I do the Roger Love voice warm-ups, which is like the go 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 go. And the other thing that I've been studying lately is through this company called Still. It's really cool because I love like the dorky science aspect of things, and they bring like the biology more into it. Like Roger, it definitely has like the vocal aspect of it. It still brings so much like the technical biology. And one of the things that they really focus on is being mindful of what they call effort. So effort could be how much pressure the breath is putting on the vocal folds. It could be how much tightness that you're applying within the vocal folds. So like before I start, it's setting all those things up so that I can start in a good place. But afterwards, like the aftercare is making sure that I stay hydrated, because I am sipping on this as we talk, but this doesn't touch our vocal cords. This doesn't touch the vocal folds. If it did, we'd be in trouble because we would now have water in our lungs. But what I kind of have a habit of is making sure that throughout the day, one of the things that, again, my friend Sean taught me is little sips of warm water throughout the day keeps your body in its best hydration. So making sure I stay hydrated, but also trying to just be respectful of the fact that, like, I don't have anything that I have to do after this that's going to require me to talk a lot. Because a lot of it's just about rest. A lot of it's just about not overusing the voice and overstraining it and overstressing it. So yeah, vocal warm-ups. I have daily practices now too, just even if it's not a warm-up for an actual presentation, I still have daily practices because a lot of it's retraining. If I'm quite conscious about, like, I can kind of almost change the quality of my voice slightly, because if I'm very, very conscious about softening through all of this, and especially softening in my diaphragm, I can actually get my voice to be pretty smooth. But because of so many years of pushing and straining it, as soon as I stop being conscious of it and consciously thinking that through, the old habits are still there. So a lot of it, like retraining the mind, retraining the voice, is a daily practice too. It's something I have to make sure I have daily practices for.
There's something that you brought up that's really important that I think a lot of people forget, is that whatever is going on with you, whatever that may be, trauma to the physical body, mental stuff, emotional, whatever that can be, you have to get a handle on it. Like, you have to have something in your daily practices so that that doesn't become overwhelming for your life. Because a lot of us will have something go wrong and then we just quit life, or we have one specific instance that happens and it does a number to us. And so we just kind of like bail out for years. And I think you taking this like amazing active approach, and not just doing that, but if you listen to them, the real way to do it is not just do it, but go teach other people how to do it too, because that makes your healing fulfilling at the same time, which is just such an amazing space to be in. Like, it's so important to be able to do that, to share that with people, to have people around you who are, going through the same things and experiencing the same stuff. What do you feel like is really next for you? Like, what's the next chapter in your life look like?
There's some really exciting stuff, honestly, because when I left Zambia, I kind of had no idea what the hell I was going to do. I knew it had something to do with my coaching company, The Journeyist. I was like, and I got certified as a coach back in 2009. Wait, is that right? Yeah, 2009. And so while I was hairdressing, I was starting to take coaching clients, just like kind of general life coaching clients. And then I always kind of studied this coaching stuff on the side with my hairdressing career. So I knew that I could do that. So I left and I was like, well, I'll start with, I will build a bigger coaching clientele. But then I just started to call people that were my friends. And I was like, hey, here's my new life. What can we do together? Like, I'm super open. Like, what do you have going on? How can we play together? What can we do? And over the last almost 2 years now, it just kind of kept directing me. Like, it was awesome. I was just kind of saying yes to everything. I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. We can do that together. Let's try. And with each thing, it just kind of kept directing me, kind of back to our point earlier, right? Like, just kind of keep taking the steps. You don't necessarily have to know the destination. So I just kept saying yes, kept working, and everything kept coming back to the people that I work with, that I feel the most impact. Like, to your point, if you want to kind of spread that love, find that group that you have the most impact with, because they'll go out then and they'll do their thing, and that group will go out and do their thing. The group that I have the most impact with is educators, coaches, and leaders, but leaders that don't want to run companies, leaders that want to embody the presence of good leadership, which is having the heart of a coach. It's having that heart of service. So I work with, I still work with, especially salon owners, because that's my industry that I've been in for a long time. And a lot of that is about communication. Like, their own presence and their own authenticity. But you asked what's next. What I'm super excited for, what's next, is much more focus on this, much more focus on talking about voice and presence with it as an educator, as a facilitator, as a speaker, presenter, whatever you are. My good friend Carlo Novoa and I just started a project that we're calling The Educator's Journey, because he has a background of education, but he's also a licensed spiritual practitioner. So we both kind of have these really similar paths. So we're basically taking kind of the traditional processes of learning to be an educator, like, you know, how do you put together a good lesson plan? How do you stand on stage? Like, what are you doing with your body and your voice and all of those different things? So all the kind of technical aspects, but more importantly, the other half of it is the inner work. It's the actual inner journey of being able to stand in front of an audience and feel authentic and have connection, and to develop a relationship with those people in a way that you can have impact. So that's a big part of it. And I'm working with my friend's salon and coaching company. We're taking a group of her leaders through kind of the same thing. I've got 2 retreats that I'm doing with them next year that's all about them finding their presence and their voice as leaders. And so that's the big focus. That's the what's next. Is it's about voice and presence and speaking and teaching and coaching and sharing. That's where I want to be.
Where does music fit into all this?
It's so interesting because, like, we've had this conversation. It's such a deep connection to my father, because I lost my father a couple of years ago. We didn't have a great relationship at that point, which is okay because we've healed that in the spiritual sense. But I was just sitting outside yesterday playing my guitar, and there's this Blitzen Trapper song called Fur, and it's about him hearing the cries of the wolves, and like he goes and like finds the wolves and they invite him. I get so choked up about this, but the wolves invite him to sing their song with them. And I can't get through that part of the song without like just getting so teary-eyed, like it hitting somewhere so deep in my heart. So music it's like a processor. We've talked about the fact that people find that healing medium that they need, and that's music for me. It's the thing that helps me process what's inside. So it's an essential part. And it doesn't happen every day. So I try to make it happen every day because it is such an important thing to me. But yeah, it's always there for me.
That's so beautiful. My mom had a stroke that paralyzed her 10 years ago. And I always say now, love and Led Zeppelin healed my mother, because we sat there with the presence of love and we played music. And music, she eventually started tapping her foot. And weeks later, she started humming.
Wow.
And time passed and she started singing the chorus, and she'd look at me like, words are coming out. I can't believe I know how to, words. And it was just that healing presence of love and the fluidity of the music, and just like, I don't know, being present. That presence is the thing that I think we're missing. And I really appreciate you opening up and sharing about your dad. One thing I didn't share before we got on the podcast, I was delivering a message from Andrew's dad to Andrew. No big deal. Just kick off the show with a little heart opening. The other thing I didn't tell you, which I find I'm just giggling when the video came on, is that he showed me, you know, I always ask for like show me something that I'll know for sure I'm not making this shit up. He showed me a Harley Davidson logo, and you're fucking wearing a Harley Davidson shirt right now. Like,
then you have to see this. This is why. Let's see if it'll focus.
Oh my gosh.
That's him.
No way.
Whoa.
He worked at Harley Davidson. This is his badge.
We got chills.
They're multiplying.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Well, glad we brought that up.
It's legit.
In, oh gosh, maybe 2012, when my mom had the stroke, my biological father spoke to me from the other side while I was in a float or sensory deprivation tank. And he was an abusive alcoholic that spent his life in jail. So I didn't really get to know much of him. And he said one thing to me while I was in that tank. He said, "Hey, baby girl, I had to pass from the physical world to guide you from the spiritual world." And that was it. I got out of the tank and I was like, what the fuck just happened to me? And Chris bought me a psychic mediumship training like pretty shortly after that. And I just started diving down that rabbit hole of being able to deliver the messages. And
Wow.
most importantly, out of all this work, because we're all psychic, we're all intuitive, it's self-trust. It's learning to trust yourself, learning to trust your own intuition, because how many times have you known something? Maybe you knew you were probably expired in the job role that you were at, but we stay longer than we are intended to, and it usually causes life lessons. So now I'm dedicated to trusting and following my intuition without question, so that I don't have to learn the lesson so hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a huge part of that multiple brain integration coaching that I was talking to you about. It's getting people to trust that more subtle, and I the only reason, and I totally agree with you, I think the only reason that these messages are more subtle is just because we've depended so much on the head brain. Like this has gotten so loud that the heart's voice, the gut's voice, like our nervous system's voice, it just is, it's very subtle. And so it's hard for people to trust it. And it doesn't necessarily speak in words all the time. Like the mind tends to speak in words and sentences, so it's easy to understand. But that gut instinct, that like intuitive hit that you get, there might not be words to it. It's just a sense. It's just a felt sense, and we have to interpret it, right? So people don't want to trust that kind of stuff, and that's a huge part of that coaching process, is getting people to actually tune back into it and integrate it, so that the intelligences are actually speaking with each other versus, basically being in a fight. Because a lot of times the intuition's telling us, like the job thing, you brought that up, is like, yeah, my intuition was like, dude, come on. There's something more important. Like you were being called to something more important, but the head brain is going, yeah, but this is a really good job. People would kill to be the education director of Samvia. You're making good living. What, you're going to bail on this secure paycheck that you get every month so that like you can pursue this other thing? Like, it's all of those kinds of things that these things aren't talking to each other. And so that's a big part of the coaching process, is to get that back into alignment.
So if someone's listening right now that is in that position where their intuition is saying, fucking go. Ours, I'll have to send you the episode, but our story of getting trapped on a mountain in Colorado and having our own near-death experience was our intuition being like, turn the fuck around. It was the first time my intuition ever yelled at me. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to ignore you anyway. You're yelling. Okay. I don't like it. I'm just going to ignore it.
That was the moment I learned breath work. We were in a car and everyone was totally panicked, and I definitely thought we were going to die. I mean, we all thought we were going to die. And something came over me and said, everyone stop talking, everybody start taking deep breaths. And I never heard of that. I'd never seen that before. Like meditation and that aspect and stuff wasn't really a thing for me yet. And it was just like, this is weird. This is different. Like, it's like the intuition spoke through my voice as though I'd never heard it before.
Okay, so maybe you're not trapped on a mountain, but you are in a position where your intuition is saying, hey, something's up, but that fear or that doubt is kicking in, or the logical brain being like, but this is what you wanted, right? What advice would you, because you could go back and tell yourself that advice. What advice would you give your guests, your clients, like in that moment, instead of waiting longer to create more disharmony or dis-ease? Like, what would you go back and say, like, just jump now? Like, what's your advice?
It's kind of tough to answer because I feel like it would be very individual.
Sure.
But I think that if I was going to kind of keep it big picture, it would be to ask yourself, what do you really want from this? Because even the mind's chatter, it wants something. It's trying to fulfill some need. It might just be a need for safety or protection or comfort. Like maybe I'm not in a place where, like, maybe comfort is non-existent in my world. And so the only thing I can stay comfortable with is this pain that I'm in right now because I know it. Like, it's terrifying to even think of something better because that's uncomfortable. So everything has a need to it. Everything has a want to it, whether it's an intuitive hit, whether it's the mind telling us terrible stories about ourselves. My belief is that it actually always is trying to be in service to you. And so if we can sit there and ask ourselves, well, why is my mind telling me that I'm not good enough? Why is my mind telling me that, like, no one will show up as a client if you take this leap? Well, what's the purpose to it? Like, if it's trying to do something for me, what would that possibly be? And I think if we start to ask those questions, it starts to shine light on some things that we can actually do something with. Because in the moment of the story, we can't really do much with it. But if we find out what the purpose is of the voice, if we find out what the purpose is of the story, then we can actually do something with that. So I think that's what I would say is ask better questions of yourself so that you can understand what's below it.
I agree. There's a lesson I teach in my signature program, Shine School, called Make Friends with Your Inner Mean Girl. It's like becoming your own bestie. And in that, I talk about, like, let's stop bashing the ego, because the ego isn't a bitch. The ego is like our best friend trying to protect us. And she's just been, or he has been given the wrong tools or the wrong framework that supported us maybe when it needed to in that moment. But what happens is it gets programmed and locked into the subconscious as, anytime I experience this or it's starting to go that direction, we're going to trigger the same response every time. And that response at 8 and 38 might be totally different. And we have to update those programs. And I think anyone, when I see the spiritual memes about like bashing the ego, I'm like, y'all don't get it. Like, that's our protection. We need that. That's called our boundary. That's so we don't become doormats as empaths.
Yeah. I love that you just said that, because I think I made a post maybe just a couple months ago that was kind of to that point, like, stop making your ego into something bad, because it is part of you. It is part of your conscious thinking mind. And so if it's part of you, if you make it bad, now you are at war with yourself. And so we have to figure out, well, what's its purpose? Because then we can befriend it. Like you said, we can actually create a relationship with it where it becomes our ally. It becomes a source of support. And like you said, protection. That's why it's there, is to protect us. And so we should have a good relationship with it.
Oh, wow.
I agree.
This has been super powerful, Andrew. I know that there are going to be a lot of people who want to hear more from you. I'll tell you, your cadence and the way that you speak has a very big calming effect. I mean, I'm sure people have told you that before, but it has a massive, it kind of puts you in that state, just listening to you kind of helps you just pare it down a little bit. And we know that you're being intentional with your words. You've talked about that, which is, to me, the presence that you give to other people is always really the gift. If you can go through your own trauma, that's fantastic to be able to do. And especially when you exude that through the way that you make people feel by just being you, not always just what you say. But I will tell you that the way that you sit or stand, I knew when Britt showed me a couple of videos of you, I was like, 100%, I like this guy. And it was not what necessarily you were saying, although I love that. It was just by the way that you were, by the way that you stood, by the way that you spoke. I was like, he gets it. He definitely understands this guy's going to help a lot of people. And tell us where we can find you, because I know there are going to be people out there who are like, I want to hear more from him.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for seeing that within me, because that means a lot. So I appreciate that. Sorry, that kind of got me a little choked up. I appreciate that.
It's true. I agree. And your laugh, like, it just, every time you giggled, I'm going to go back and listen to the podcast, and it just sends like warm honey down my body. It's so beautiful.
Man, can we talk more?
Well, I don't have anything.
No, so as far as social media, the best place to connect with me is on Instagram if it continues to work. Today is like people just like my friend Jesse Linares, his entire account just got deleted all of a sudden today.
Yeah,
I guess there was like hundreds of people that just like their accounts got deleted.
Yeah,
But
I went through that identity crisis back in February. My account got hacked and I got extorted for money, and they deleted like 30,000 people. And I was like, well, can't be tied up into these labels and all the things, because they could be just gone. And like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I understand how
Seriously.
people, I understand the social media struggles sometimes. So
Yeah,
Instagram,
so-
that's where I love creeping on you. What about a website? Do you have a website where people can learn more about your coaching and everything? you're
yeah,
into?
absolutely. They can go to the journeyist.life. The journeyist is a made up word. It's journey with IST at the end of it. So it's the journeyist.life. To be totally honest, the website is due for an update because I built it right at the beginning of when I started all of this stuff. And kind of part of the story we told today is that at that point, I wasn't real sure exactly what the hell I was doing. So it's a bit what's the word I'm looking for? It's just a broad brushstroke. But if you want to get to know me a little bit more, there is like an about me page, and that just kind of tells more of my story. So yeah, absolutely. And you can reach out to me through the website too.
That's perfect. We'll put all of your information in the show notes. And honestly, the journeyist, like all words are made up. Actually, a story was coming through that I want to leave you with. When we were in Iceland a few years ago, I received information that said words are magic sticks. Be careful of your words. And then the word abracadabra came up. However, the original word was abrahadabra, but they changed it. They put the C in there so that people wouldn't use its power. But it basically boils down to the meaning of turning words into form. So with that being said, your final words of wisdom for us.
Oh man.
No pressure.
No pressure. I think my final words of wisdom would be if you are out there and if you are suffering, I think the first place to turn is to your authenticity. Because I really have to say, after all of these years of coaching and working with people, when it really comes down to it, if there is pain, it's usually because we've stepped away from the true self. We've covered it up with something. We've built something on top of it. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're having a hard time, it's time to get back to yourself. It might be that simple.
Let it be easy.
Yeah, it would be easy.
That's what living an elevated life is, just letting it be easy. You don't have to try. And that's the beautiful gift of being yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well
so much
said.
for tuning in with us, Andrew. This has been so enlightening. We appreciate your heart and soul and all the work you're doing in this world to make it a more beautiful, better place.
I appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.